Hi, it's week 7. Course is done. So, thought I'd record a final video for the class. Um, I apologize. I still have a head cold and my ears are plugged up, so I can't hear very well. So, kind of a bummer. Anyhow, so I spent all day Saturday grading after being out of town part of last week, and it was kind of bittersweet. I mean, I was glad to get it done, but on the other hand, kind of sad to finish up the class. So I'm not exactly sure you guys feel the same way, but probably not. But anyhow, so let me just wrap up this past week. So week 7, you really kind of dug deep into gender and leadership and culture and leadership. So I was really excited to use this book because they had actually chapters dedicated to these, which I think is often missed in a very important topics to discuss. So the first exercise had you look at Sheryl Sandberg's TED Talk from 2010. I thought that was an interesting TED Talk. So I was really impressed with your feedback. I wanted to highlight just a couple people's comments. Julio's response to Beth Ray I thought was pretty insightful. Uh, so specifically with regards to stereotypes of managers and leaders, I think we all kind of have in our minds what a good leader or manager should be like. And part of this class has been designed to try to break down what those stereotypes look like, especially the false part of it. We have ideas that they should be extroverted, that they should be charismatic, that they should be techno whizzes and be experts in their field. And sometimes that is the case and sometimes not. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a good manager or leader. But I think you need to really work on identifying what your biases are or stereotypes are of what good managers and leaders are. Because it just isn't reality to think that they're all the same. Just like we don't want the people that we work with or the people that we surround ourselves with in our lives to all be the same. That would be kind of boring. So there is true advantage to having diversity around us. But the temptation is to surround ourselves with people who either fit our stereotype or people who are like ourselves. So it really takes intentional effort to get past that and to put people around you that are different. So I think I shared a few weeks ago about our attempt at one of my last positions of hiring somebody who was different than us, somebody who was different than the faculty. Most of the faculty were very big picture, logical people, or feeling like myself. And we went and we specifically hired somebody who was very detail oriented and very logical. And though she fit a definite need within the program, she was a little bit more difficult, at least for me to work with, because she and I just didn't fit as well as the person prior to her position. So, which was fine. I just had to kind of work through that. We weren't going to have this really tight relationship because she was different than me, but she brought skills and perspectives to her position that were absent before she started. So anyhow, just keep this stuff in mind. It's something that's easy to kind of put aside until we go through, training or something bad happens. But just keep in mind that we often operate based on these stereotypes of gender or cultural background or weight or all kinds of stuff, and just be aware and then work to kind of control or give people a fair shot. So anyhow, what else? I do think it's interesting that we always focus gender discussions on how women have been treated. But I think that's narrow-minded in that I'm sure that men are discriminated against also. So again, it's not always about women. It's not always about race. It's not always about religion. It's not always about age. It's about all of us using shortcuts of stereotypes to make decisions. And in many cases, those stereotypes serve us well. Otherwise, we'd be processing even more information in our heads, which would be overwhelming. But in some cases, when you are really aware of this bias, you really need to be cautious and guard against yourself being unfair in your decisions. So I also want to call out Marilyn, the story that she shared with Kristen about the young lady who she tried to help by providing a promotion. I thought that was genius. So again, I think we didn't really address it in this class. I have in other classes before this whole concept of generational differences. So millennials and traditionalists and boomers and blah, blah, blah. So there's very clear differences, lots of literature support differences in generations and just basically how environmental influences and historical times that we've lived have influenced who we are as people. So again, I thought her example was genius, and I so appreciate her sharing that. And it's important for you to keep in mind as you go forward in your career. Several times in my career, I've made financial steps backwards for the sole investment in future. So, money is important, but sometimes when you're trying to make jumps in different industries or in moving from staff to management, sometimes you have to make those investments and the money's not going to be there. But if you get into those, if you get the shot and you get into those positions, then you can shine, and it's only a matter of time before you'll shoot up. When I took my first academic job, I went from a full-time salaried person into a part-time hourly no benefit position. Eventually worked myself into a salary position, and then once I finished my PhD, since then I've quadrupled my income and all of the benefits, rights, and responsibilities that come with that. So again, it took some calculated risk to get to where I am today. It wasn't like I just went up, 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 up. I went up, down, up, way down, up. So you have to kind of think strategically about what is that next step. So anyhow, so I put the question, why should a male student care about the topic of gender? And that was solely just to remind you that a significant portion of the healthcare industry is female. So males in the class, you're going to find yourself potentially supervising females a big portion of your career and working side by side with them. So just be aware of that, and it's important. But again, it's not all about females being disadvantaged, even though there's lots of literature to support that they are. Should they be penalized because they're the ones with the reproductive organs to have children? So I think as a society we have to learn to deal with that. So just something to keep in mind. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I don't know that the males in this class can appreciate this, um, but maybe I was going to bring that up later, but I'll do it now. So I've worked for men the majority of my career, have never really had issues working for bosses that are male. The couple of really bad bosses that I've worked with have been females. So if you want to talk about discrimination, women on women discrimination is horrific. And so I don't know that it's necessarily gender. There are just some really bad bosses out there. And to think that as a woman, I'm going to be protected because my supervisor or boss or dean or provost or whatever is going to be fair to me because we are the same gender is ridiculous. So just be aware. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and if I ever get the opportunity to do some intense research again, I'm so diving into this subject. So I will share quickly. When I was working on my PhD, I did a qualitative research class that was taught by a woman. She was a qualitative researcher, and she worked a lot in women's prisons. And as an example, she was sharing some of her research with us, and she presented this concept called mother blame. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this before, but mother blame basically looks at imprisoned females, and when they go back and look at these socio-psychological perspectives, women tend to blame women. So even if a girl is raised in a family or with a parental structure of a woman and a man, and even if the man is abusive to the young woman, to the girl always blames the mother. So it is a fascinating concept to me. I earned my PhD back in the early 2000s. I graduated in 2005. So I think I took that class in 2004 or something like that. So for 14 years, I've held on to that. And I just find that fascinating that if I turn out to in a situation where I'm negatively impacted, even if the source is very clearly my father, I'm going to blame my mother for it because my mother allowed that to happen to me. Isn't that fascinating? So women tend to always blame women. And I think from a management and leadership perspective, I've worked for women who have been awesome also. So, there's got to be something that happens that counteracts that. But it's a fascinating area. So, but it's called mother blame. If you ever want to read more about it, it's fascinating. So when I learned more about mother blame, because we had to read a few articles about it, the first thing I realized that neither of my parents went to college. My dad was a primary breadwinner. My mom was a homemaker. My mom and I don't have a lot in common, other than we're both females, but she's very quiet, reads a lot, not terribly social. I'm more like my dad. But the one thing I realized is that my mother never defined my future for me. My mother never talked to me about, when I got married or when I would have children or that I would go to college or I would have a career. My mom never labeled me or put pressure on me to be anything other than what I wanted to be. And in many of these mother blame situations, the mothers, I think unconsciously, are starting to influence their daughters by defining who they are. And if the daughter would say, "Well, I'm not gonna," the daughter would say, "I want to go to college." The mother would say something to the effect of, well, I didn't go to college and I'm fine. Why do you think you're better than me? Um, so when I learned that my mother never did that, first of all, I never appreciated it because it was the absence of something negative, which we tend to not realize or are aware of. And I was immediately so incredibly grateful for my mother. So one year I wrote her a Mother's Day card beyond all Mother's Day cards and said, I never appreciated that, but I took this class and I realized it. And I've pursued a career and an education because I didn't know any better. I didn't know that I couldn't. So for you out there who have daughters, males and females, make sure you're cautious as to never limit your daughter or sons. I mean, don't limit people. Really encourage them to be who they're meant to be. Give them the freedom to really explore and find their passions in life, and find their purpose, what they were put here to be. So anyhow, mother blame. Look it up when you get bored. It's very interesting. So discussion question 22 was responding to other cultures. I think that was a good exercise, I believe. Hopefully, I hope you found it interesting. So many of you pointed to cultural competency training, and I've been through lots of cultural competency training. For the most part, I don't know that it really overly influenced me. It was helpful. I get overwhelmed thinking that my responsibility is to learn about every culture out there. I mean, it's just there's so many, and as the U.S. population continues to melt, and people, I think, are in some ways losing their identity with those cultures, or they just become more and more diverse. I don't know that it's going to be possible to label these cultures, though. I do have to say I greatly appreciate learning about them, and understanding different viewpoints and perspectives. I look at it more from an individual perspective versus so much cultural, and I'm sure that's greatly influenced by my complete lack of understanding, knowledge, appreciation, value of my own culture. I know so little about my background. Despite my family trying to tell me who my ancestors were, I was like, whatever. So perhaps that's coming sometime in my development. I just haven't got there yet. But I've had very influential friends from all different walks of life. Some are racial, some are religious backgrounds, some are socioeconomic, age, personalities. I've had all perspectives, not all, but many. And I've actually talked to a number of them and said, how do I demonstrate respect for you and your culture? And they would look at me and I'd say, do you want me to become like you? Do you want me to, be able to converse to you about it? And they would just look at me and I'm like, well, no, it's my culture, not yours. But they want to be seen as individuals with value and with contribution. And so that has impacted a lot of my appreciation of culture. And I've really tried in this class, and I hope you've felt it a bit, trying to get you to share your culture with the class. I don't understand the point of striving for diversity, but then within classrooms and within workplaces, never engaging people at that diversity or cultural or gender level. It's like if we're going to work so hard to have diverse, but then not engage diverse, expect everybody to act the same, then what's the advantage of having diversity? So I've not seen that done well ever. So anyhow, my main point is you can have diversity training until the cows come home, but until you as a leader or a manager really role model what it is that we're trying to achieve with diversity within your space of influence, I think it's all rhetoric. So I think it's like we're checking a box. Do you do diversity training? Yep. Do we do safety training? Yep. And I just don't see and I think the average person is too smart. And they're just like, oh, they're just checking a box. I'm not going to fully engage in this because I don't really see that it's making any difference in the workplace. So anyhow, as a leader, always be aware that those that you're leading are managing are watching you very, very carefully. And you can say one thing and behave another. And they're going to be watching your behaviors much more closely than watching the words come out of your mouth or the emails that you're typing. So really watch carefully what you're doing. So at this meeting I was at last week, when I was sitting across the table from a retired now but senior executive that ran health systems all across the United States, and he was sharing a story. He was so colorful. It was hysterical, but mostly just because he was so extroverted. It was quite humorous. But he was sharing a story about how his staff, the facility, wanted to have a costume. So on Halloween, everybody would wear a costume. And he said he was fully supportive of it, but that he never wore a costume. And everybody at the table was like, well, why didn't you? Why didn't you join in the fun? And he said, I think people have an image in their mind of what the leader of an organization should look like. And I don't think if I came dressed as Mickey Mouse that I was going to be fitting that image. So he said, I was fully supportive of everybody else doing it. But at the level of my position and the role within the facility, the organization, and the community, he said, I just didn't feel it was appropriate for me to participate. So I've been noodling that one because I'm like, wow, is that true? Is that realistic? Is that the extent of what role modeling goes to? I don't know, but an interesting thing to think about. So Project Implicit, I'm thinking maybe that my directions weren't clear. A few of you, I think, kind of got lost in some weeds on this one. Or you've participated in enough of these types of experiences that it just wasn't as meaningful as I had hoped. So I did about 3 or 4. I did one on ageism. I did one on obesity. I did one on gay and lesbian. I think I did. I think I did at least 3 or 4 of them. I find them fascinating because I think oftentimes we think that we're very aware of where our biases are, and these implicit biases are, and this assessment is designed to try to uncover what those might be so that we can be aware of them. So anyhow, again, it goes back to that whole Johari's window that we talked about in week 1 about being aware and expanding that known window and decreasing the hidden and the blind spot. So I have been, as I'm sure that you have been too, I've been surrounded by lots of people in my career. Some of them have had some incredible gifts, incredible gifts. But there's been a few, and unfortunately some of these are students too, that there's this thing, and I know you know what I'm talking about, that I have to believe that they don't know about this thing. And unfortunately, I have not been provided the opportunity to give them feedback. To give feedback, you almost have to be invited to give feedback. I don't know if you've ever given feedback to somebody who didn't ask for it. Like even my daughter, she's 18, and I'll say, do you know you have, something in your teeth? She'll get upset with me that I'm pointing out her flaws, and it's like I'm just trying to help you so that she gets really upset with me when I do that. So, and I found that in my career with working with colleagues, obviously people above me. I don't know that I've ever been asked to give feedback to somebody who's above me, but on a peer level. I have. And with students, there's only so much feedback that I can give you. So anyhow, you have to invite people to give feedback. And if you ever read that book, which actually is right here someplace, How to Say Anything to Anybody, that whole concept of Sherry Harley's book is inviting people to give you feedback. But even if you've received feedback from somebody, identifying something in your hidden or blind spot area, it could be a behavior, it could be a bias, it could be the way you dress, it could be ignorance, it could be a skill, lack of a skill, whatever. Once you receive that feedback, you have to actually accept it and own it, which is, again, really hard. So first of all, you have to open yourself up to receiving feedback, provide them the method to do that where they feel safe and that they can. Then once you get it, you have to receive it and accept it. Really hard to do that. And then even if you do, you have to then work to change your behavior. So I don't know about you, but changing my behavior is ridiculously hard. I've gained and lost the same 20 pounds in my life about 4,000 times. So learning to change behavior and making it stick is there's probably a billion books written about it. It's really, really hard stuff to do. So, but if you really do desire to be an effective leader and really do desire to support the goals and objectives and mission of organizations and people that make those organizations up, this is where you make your investment. So I mentioned earlier, I think a couple weeks ago, that I did a 360 evaluation, and I've been kind of stuck on some feedback I got. So I think I got some clarity on that at this meeting this last week. So quick story. So I was watching a colleague of mine. I know him. This was an accreditation meeting. It's called the Accreditation Council, and it's all of these people that go out and do reviews of the programs that come and they present the programs, and then they vote. I don't get to vote. I do the site visits, but I don't vote. I'm not a commissioner. I'm just a lowly fellow. But so I'm sitting here and I'm watching this this commissioner who was a fellow just until this last year he was made a commissioner. He's younger than me. I would guess probably at least 10 years. He's African American. He is an academic by training, never worked in the field. He's shorter, I'm taller, he's thinner, I'm not. So anyhow, we really have nothing in common other than the fact that we work in higher ed and that we both have been connected to this accreditor. So I'm watching him in this meeting, and this meeting is all day. You're going through gruesome levels of detail. And this guy is a commissioner now, so he doesn't really have we're reviewing all these programs, some that he had nothing to do with, other than he has to vote on whether they become accredited or not. And I'm watching him dig through all of this information on this website that we have access to. And every program, they must have reviewed like 10 programs. He's digging through, and I'm watching him write down questions. And then when the question time opens up, he would ask really thoughtful questions about the program or specific areas, and trying to support the council's decision whether to accredit these programs. And I'm sitting here and I'm just watching him, and I'm like, I'm kind of blown away that he's putting so much into it. Because what was I doing? I was trying to prepare, because I had all the materials printed, but I hadn't reviewed them most recently to prepare the program that I was going to be presenting. So I was working on that, and then I was checking my email. I was looking at my phone, and I had a cold, so I felt like crap too, but that's a whole another issue. Um, anyhow, my story is that this guy was present. He was present in the moment and giving everything he had to the task at hand. Um, and I don't do that. I don't do that. I multitask like a dog. Um, and it is very rare that I'm completely 100% invested in the moment. I'm usually thinking ahead or thinking behind or, strategizing about what needs to happen in order for this to happen. But it is very difficult for me to tame this sucker down to be present in the moment. And I think this 360 result, I think this was my group, those I invited to participate. I think it was their gift to me that if I want to move forward in my career as a leader, that I need to learn to be present in the moment. So anyhow, I haven't fixed it yet. I'm just kind of trying to identify it. But anyhow, that was my experience, and I don't know, it just kind of hit me watching him, how he is so different from me, and what could I learn from that. So anyhow, so final reflection papers. Again, I do think I need to rework this exercise. What I was trying to do was structure something that would give you the opportunity to process each week. But I didn't provide like a final course review. So most of you just stuck to the week 7, even though I didn't ask you to cover week 5 and 6 also, or the course as a whole. So which was fine. I mean, most of you did obviously address week 7. For those of you that took the time to address weeks 5 and 6 also, and then to give me some kind of final summative thoughts about the course and how it went and what you gained from it and what you would like to see different, I really, really appreciate you doing that. So I can only make this class better if I get your feedback on what worked for you and what didn't work for you. So if you haven't completed the course evaluation through SmartEval, which I really hope a lot of you did, so that's your feedback to me and helps me grow. I think it was, who said that? I think it was that Laurie or one of you said, gosh, I'm sorry. I meant to bring that, but sometimes, especially with gender, when I asked you to identify what are you going to do different, you would say you would reach, when you are at the table, you'll reach back and pull the next person to the table. That was genius. I think I commented to you, but I forgot to mention it in this summary. So, but anyhow, your investment in this program is giving us feedback, thoughtful feedback, constructive feedback on what works and what you were hoping for that you didn't get, what you got that you were surprised that you got that was so helpful, all of that kind of stuff. That helps us as faculty grow and improve these courses from year to year. So anyhow, I have really enjoyed this course. I hope you did too. So either that or I'm just sitting here kind of a little moron, just in my own little world. But I've really enjoyed interacting with you and giving you feedback. I hope it's been helpful. I've tried to give some difficult feedback to some of you that I've seen that you're just kind of stalling in your careers, and there's just really no reason for that. I really expect and I don't know that I've ever said this to a class, but the 10 of you in this class, I expect to see all of you at the table, and you are going to be powerful influences in this next decade of healthcare. And I hope that you stay in touch with this program and in touch with me. And I'd love to get you back in the class sometime, maybe as a guest speaker, you can talk to the class. So I beg you to stay in touch. This is why I do what I do, is to support you, and knowing where you've excelled and where the program could have supported future acceleration will only make us better, and that's my goal. So anyhow, stay in touch, and again, It was a pleasure to get to know each of you. I feel like I know the insides of you so much. I just actually ran into Beth Ray at the Wallace Library, and she was like, "Hi, Carla," and I'm like you look familiar, but I can't think of why. So I'm like, if I could have seen your soul, I would have known you were Beth Ray. But it took me a little bit to connect the two because I just see this tiny little picture of her in my courses. So I feel like I know you all well, and I've been extremely impressed with your growth and development just in this class and your openness to learn and really push yourself. So anyhow, take care and stay in touch. Have an awesome week. Bye.